Hey Bills Mafia. Today we're diving deep into the legacy, the transformation, and the future of the Buffalo Bills home turf. We'll be comparing the old Highmark Stadium with a brand new version rising just across the street, set to open in 2026. This isn't just about some turf and some field and some seats and things like that. This culminates in more than 50 years of Buffalo Bills football. Now, before moving to Highmark Stadium, the Bills played their early years at the War Memorial Stadium, also known as the Rock Pile, in the city of Buffalo. The Bills played there from 1960 to 1972. The venue was small and outdated by NFL stadium standards, so a new stadium was needed, and that's where Rich Stadium comes in. When Rich Stadium opened in 1973, it was considered by some ahead of its time, actually. A massive open-air venue that could fit around 80,000 fans when it first opened. Throughout the years, it has seen its capacity decreased as luxury areas and suites replaced traditional seats and bleachers. Around 1999, it was decreased to about 75,000, 73,000 in the 2000s, and then finally to around 71,000 in the 2010s, where the capacity sits today. Over the decades, it has went through several different name changes. It started off as Rich Stadium, then Ralph Wilson Stadium, then New Era Field, then Bills Stadium, and eventually Highmark Stadium. The stadium has witnessed many memorable Bills moments. This includes 4 straight Super Bowl runs in the 1990s, including the 1990 AFC Championship game where the Bills beat the Raiders 51-3, one of the top Buffalo Bills moments of all time. It also saw one of the greatest comebacks of all time, the 1992 AFC wildcard game against the Houston Oilers. The Bills were down 35-3 in the second half, came back to win in overtime. Absolutely legendary game. And it's also witnessed the playoff drought, unfortunately, but we can move on from that. Nothing to say about that. We've all lived through it. And tons of new memories and memorable games that the current team has filled the stadium with. The 2025 season will be the last for Old Highmark Stadium, so there's still one last chance to fill it with some more great Buffalo Bills moments. It has also hosted numerous other events besides Bills games, including over 30 concerts throughout the years. Perhaps the most notable event the stadium has hosted, other than football games of course, was the first Winter Classic game in 2008, when the Buffalo Sabres took on the Pittsburgh Penguins on New Year's Day. More than 70,000 fans packed the stadium as the Penguins eventually beat the Sabres 2-1 in a shootout. However, at least the Sabres fans got there early, got to snowball the Pittsburgh Penguins bus. The game was absolutely crazy to watch. The snow was coming down. Absolutely wild scenes out there. The stadium also hosted a 2018 World Junior Ice Hockey game between Canada and the United States, as around 45,000 fans this time watched the USA beat Canada 4-3 in a shootout. But despite all the memories, nothing lasts forever anymore. Besides a few stadiums like, Fenway Park, Wrigley Field, Lambeau Field, which they seem like they'll last forever, they'll outlast all of us. Highmark Stadium, however, is not one of those, and is actually one of the oldest in the NFL. Only Soldier Field, home of the Chicago Bears, Lambeau Field, frozen tundra of the Green Bay Packers, and the Kansas City Chiefs Arrowhead Stadium are older than the Bills' Highmark Stadium. Now, let's transition to the new Highmark Stadium and what it's going to look like. The new Highmark Stadium is set to open for the 2026 NFL season. Originally, it was supposed to be around $1.5 billion. Well, it won't be a dome. It will have more modern features that the old Highmark Stadium doesn't have. When the new stadium was being discussed years ago, there was a big debate over dome versus no dome. It split the local leaders, the politicians, the fans. Everyone was kind of split on it. Some people wanted a dome, maybe to try and host a Super Bowl, or maybe other events. Some people didn't want a dome. But either way, I doubt Buffalo would ever get a Super Bowl without a dome, with a dome. Doesn't really matter. Buffalo was never getting a Super Bowl. Some people don't like to sit out in the cold. Some don't like watching football being played outside. Some love outdoor games. Some like the home field advantage that bad weather has. Some want to watch football in a neutral, dry environment and let the best team win. Everyone's got their own personal preferences. So overall, it was a pretty even split for those who wanted a dome and those who didn't want a dome. No dome eventually won out, likely for a couple reasons. Ownership was on the record saying they do not want a dome. In addition, a dome would have cost extra money, with some estimates being hundreds of millions, up to around an extra $500 million, and that was already on top of the current funding levels for the stadium. Here's a breakdown of sort of the differences, maybe some changes between the old Highmark Stadium that the Bills are playing in now and the new one. The stadium will hold around 62,000 fans. That's down from around the 71,000 that the old Highmark Stadium has. There will also be standing room only sections that may total up to another 5,000 fans. So that puts the total around 67,000 fans. We'll know more once the stadium actually opens and games are played. So why the decrease in capacity? There's likely a few reasons for it. One is to try to create a more intense, intimate environment while focusing on comfort and visibility, things like that. The trend in newer sports stadium construction has shifted away from packing in as many people as possible to try and focus more on fan comfort, experience, luxury, those type of things. Having fewer seats also allows for more luxury areas that teams can sell at a premium and make more money on than, traditional seats, traditional bleachers. Another reason is, cost. Stadiums are expensive to build, with the Bills Stadium originally expected to cost around $1.5 billion, but that has since risen to as high as $2 billion according to some estimates. Adding in more and more seats just costs more money that the team or the government didn't want to pay for. In the new Highmark Stadium, there'll be some canopy coverage. That's different from the old Highmark Stadium, where only a handful of seats were covered and you had those heated sections. In the new stadium, around 65% of all seats will be protected from the elements, the rain, the snow, the sun, things like that. The field, however, remains open air, but the stadium will also be grass as opposed to turf, and there'll be heaters underneath the grass to melt away the snow and ice and hopefully make snow distribution and things like that a lot easier. The new stadium has promised different fan amenities. This includes things like wider concourses for better foot traffic, as well as better sight lines from the concourses and sight lines from your seat. They say there'll be more food options and local vendors, but yeah, you'll probably still have to pay an arm and a leg for a beer, a hot dog, and a snack and all that stuff, unfortunately. That's just how stadiums concessions work. Unfortunately, they nickel and dime you for anything. It sucks, but what are you going to do? Although a few sports teams have introduced affordable fan-friendly concession options, so if you're one of those teams, shout out to you. You're doing things right. There'll be, in the new Highmark Stadium, I'm sure there'll be upgraded restrooms. I can safely say that I'm pretty sure we can all kiss the troughs in the men's restroom goodbye. If you've been to Highmark Stadium, you've seen the troughs, you know what I mean. And I'm sure there'll be state-of-the-art video boards, sound system, all that high-tech stuff that new stadiums have as well. There'll be modern HVAC, LED lighting, energy-efficient designs, state-of-the-art video boards, sound system, high-tech mumbo-jumbo stuff that I'm sure will look great, sound great, all that stuff. Alright, some location and background info on the new stadium. The stadium will sit across the street from the old one. Your tailgate spot likely won't have to change too much, hopefully. Fingers crossed for you. Bills Mafia's got to keep the tailgating game strong at the new stadium, and I'm sure we will. There are other locations for the new stadium that were discussed and sort of thought about. This includes downtown, Niagara Falls, the North Towns, to name a few. Ultimately, with the space around the current stadium available and the field house already in Orchard Park, it made sense to keep the new stadium next to the old one, as, stadiums you need quite a bit of room for those. The stadium is being designed by Populous, who previously designed Salem Field where the Buffalo Bisons play, and also around 10 other active NFL stadiums. The new stadium will also be called Highmark Stadium. The naming rights will go ahead and transfer over. And as anyone who has lived in Western New York or has been a fan of Bills Mafia can attest to, the talk of a new stadium has been going on for quite a while. Talks really started to get ongoing and rolling in the years following the death of Bills' original owner, Ralph Wilson. And lastly, for the new Bills Stadium, let's talk about the costs. But before we do, let's go into some background on the cost of the old Highmark Stadium. Now get ready for this one. The old Highmark Stadium cost around $22 million when it was constructed. When you adjust that for inflation, that costs around $150 or so million in today's money. Construction was financed only by Erie County. Ralph Wilson and New York State, neither of them contributed to the construction cost of the stadium. Ralph Wilson actually threatened to move the team if a new stadium was not built, so hence the funding and the urgency by Erie County to get a new stadium built. Construction started in the spring of 1972, and the stadium was ready for football by the next fall in 1973. Throughout the years, Highmark Stadium has undergone numerous renovations, adding amenities, changes in capacity, among other renovations. Total renovation costs are difficult to get an exact estimate of, but I put the total renovation costs in the stadium's history somewhere around $200 million or so. In one of the first instances of stadium naming rights for the Bills Stadium were sold to Rich Products, a Buffalo-based food company, for $1.5 million for 25 years, approximately $60,000 a year. When that deal expired, Rich Products declined to renew the rights deal, and the name was later changed to Ralph Wilson Stadium. Alright, let's move on to the construction costs for the new Highmark Stadium. As the dust hasn't settled yet on the new stadium, it's hard to get an exact number, but here's what we know so far about the costs. The original estimate was around $1.4 billion or so in the spring of 2022. That was then updated to $1.5 billion in the spring of 2023. Since then, costs have increased, and the new estimate for the new stadium is somewhere probably around $2 billion. Here are some cost breakdowns based on the original stadium deal. Public funding would be around $850 million, with $600 million coming from New York State and $250 million coming from Erie County. Bills ownership would be on the hook for around $350 million, with the NFL G4 loan program covering about another $200 million. With the majority of the original stadium cost paid for by New York State, the state will actually own the stadium. In the stadium deal, the Bills signed a 30-year lease with a buyout option after 15 years. The state will also contribute $100 million over 15 years for maintenance and $6 million a year for over the course of the lease for other general improvements. The Bills are responsible for any overrun costs that exceed the initial estimates. To fund some of their portion, the Bills have been selling personal seat licenses, or PSLs, to season ticket holders. A personal seat license is a paid license that allows the holder the exclusive right to purchase season tickets for a specific seat in the new stadium. PSLs are common nowadays and are used by sports teams to help finance new stadium constructions. PSL prices for the new stadium have reportedly varied, with the cost being anywhere from around $1,000 to maybe up to $50,000, depending on the seat and its location in the stadium. Some fans aren't happy about the PSLs, thinking that they're a greedy overreach, trying to get extra money out of fans to build a new stadium. But unfortunately, that's just how new stadium construction works these days. It sucks, but it is what it is. The Bills are aiming to sell around $200 million in PSLs to allocate towards new stadium funding. There have been different payment options for fans, including lump sum payments, short-term interest-free payment plans, and long-term financing options with interest. With the increased cost of the stadium, the Bills are seeking to borrow additional funds, around $600 million, which would require an exemption to the NFL's debt limit of $700 million. The amount of public funding for the stadium is one of the largest in North American sports history, which has garnered some criticism and critiques. Some economists and those who study stadium deals have called it one of the worst they've ever seen. Some people believe that public money shouldn't be spent on sports stadiums, and that the public doesn't get its money back in economic activity and growth for all the money that it puts in. Stadium negotiations took years to iron out. Originally, Bills ownership asked for a fully funded taxpayer stadium, and reportedly threatened to relocate the team, potentially to Austin, Texas, if they didn't get a deal that they were happy with. A deal was eventually struck, and work on the new stadium began in June of 2023. As previously mentioned, Highmark, the health insurance company and the sponsor of the old Highmark Stadium, had the right of first refusal for the new stadium naming options, and they struck a deal to continue sponsoring the new Buffalo Bills Stadium. So whether you've been freezing in the 300s since the old stadium opened in 1973, or you're ready to attend your first Bills game this upcoming season, one thing is for sure, Buffalo Bills football is entering a new era. The crowd will be smaller, the stadium will be newer, playing surface will be different, but the colors of the Buffalo Bills will be the same. The Bills will be playing football in the new Highmark Stadium in 2026. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more sports content, from stadium tours, game day experiences, histories of, and much more. And let me know below, are you excited for the new stadium, or will you miss the old one? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.